Our seventh tradition states every AA group ought to be fully self-supported, declining outside contributions. We will now pass the basket. This is a weekly STEP meeting. Our format is as follows. A speaker is asked to talk for 25 to 30 minutes on the STEP of that week, followed by discussion or questions until 7 p.m. You can find these weekly meetings on our YouTube page, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe, and share. That brings us to the speaker portion of the meeting on Monday, July 15th in Doylestown, PA at the Monday night, 6 p.m. Stay Alive Literature and Step Group at St. Paul's Lutheran Church. Tonight's speaker is Joe. They will be sharing their experience on steps 8 and 9. This is a guy that I really credit, my sobriety to. He took me to my first meeting about 6 months ago, and it's completely changed my life. So it means a lot that he's here to speak to us. So this is Joe.
You're going to hear the name Joe a lot. Joe, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm glad to be here tonight. My sponsor always reminds me that service is crucial to strong and healthy sobriety, and the least I can do is give back to the program. Something that was given to me so freely. So 25 minutes is a long time to talk, but I'm sure I'll get lost along the way. So I'll keep a timer here. So a little bit about myself and how I got to where I am today, and my experience with steps 8 and 9, and all the steps really, because I feel like can't work one without working the rest. But my sobriety date is February 9th of 2018, so I have almost 6.5 years now. And I have a sister who's also in the program. She'll have 10 years on August 8th, which is really miraculous for the both of us to be sober, because alcoholism runs rampant on both sides of my family. I mean, it's definitely wreaked havoc throughout the generations. And like any good alcoholic, I was not one until I would never admit defeat and admit that I was an alcoholic, even while I watched my sister and go through all of her struggles, and my father and my mother, who continues to struggle with not only alcoholism, but also severe mental illness, and aunts and uncles. Like I said, it just runs in the family. But I wasn't an alcoholic. I had it all figured out. But leading up to February 9th of 2018, I'll start with the end of my drinking. My end of my drinking ended. It was like a 6-month blackout, more or less, like bits and pieces of things, I can remember barely. But it ended with me. I had been drinking so much that my body I wasn't able to ingest alcohol anymore. My body was rejecting the alcohol, and I think we all know by now that, because I couldn't continue to drink, I was going into fatal withdrawal and seizing up in my house, and but for the grace of God, my mother came over to check on me, because she hadn't heard from me in a while, and I was admitted to Bryn Mawr Hospital, and I spent the first 5 days there in a coma, an induced coma. They put me into a heavy state of sedation to kind of, to quell the seizures and stuff. And then I did 30 days of rehab after a 2-week stay in the hospital. But so alcohol quite literally brought me to death's doorstep. I never take it for granted that I'm very lucky to be speaking to you people tonight. But growing up, yeah, my sister and I had different experiences with our parents. But like, life at home was chaotic, to say the least. And my parents split up, and they didn't get along very well. And so when my sister went off to college, I was, entering into high school, and I was like at the height of the turmoil of like the more or less the war between my parents. And I used to blame them for all that stuff, and say that like that's why I turned out the way that I am, and I don't think that way anymore. AA has changed my point of view as far as that is concerned, but it didn't help, being involved in those situations, and it wasn't too long into high school that I discovered some things other than alcohol that helped me escape that reality of home life. And then not too long after high school, I discovered that, I like to drink, alcohol does the same thing, and it isn't as shady of a thing to get involved in. So by the time I was like 22, I was pretty much drinking like every weekend, most nights of the week, and doing other things along the way too. Some very illegal things. But when I was 22, I also got into the Carpenters Union, where Joe and I are both members of the Carpenters Union, and that's where my drinking kind of took off for the first time, because I was surrounded by guys who drank like almost every day, and you can get away with it as long as you showed up to work and did your job. You could, I adopted that work hard, play hard philosophy at like age 22. I could party pretty much every night as long as I showed up to work on time and did my job and didn't get hurt or hurt anyone else. Yeah, I was pretty good. I could get away with it. And that only progressed as I got older. I kind of put down the other stuff. Not kind of. I did. I put down for the most part the other stuff. And every time I stopped doing one thing, my drinking kind of replaced that, and my drinking got worse. And so, like, by the time I was finishing my apprenticeship around age 25, 26, like, I was definitely drinking every day. I was definitely drinking on the way home from work every day, and I was going out drinking every night. And I lived that way until I was 33. Like, I drank every night. I'm not even exaggerating. Like, I think I could count the nights I didn't drink on one hand between age like 25 and when I got sober. And just like most people along the way, things happened in my life that had a direct effect on me, emotionally, and like a good alcoholic, I used alcohol to get through those times, good, bad, and in between, like all the experiences of life that we all go through. I experienced myself, and alcohol was right there with me the whole time. And I didn't realize it then. I realize it now that, like, my alcoholism was with me from a young age, but in my 20s is when it really blossomed into like a progressive disease, and I didn't realize it, and I didn't really care because I was getting along. I was getting through life, or so I thought. I was getting through it, and I was doing adult things, and I bought a house, and I had the fiance, and for all intents and purposes, like, my life seemed okay from the outside, but inside I was a wreck. It was torture to be stuck with what was going on in between my ears, and the only thing that worked for me was alcohol. Like, it was the only thing that offered any kind of like relief. But you flip the coin over, it also was, alcohol caused 99% of the trouble in my life. like I said, I had a fiance and we got married and divorced 5 months later. You know, it was a pretty much as soon as we got back from our honeymoon, she had had enough of my drinking, and by that point I was a maintenance drinker. Like I had to drink around the clock, and you know, I would black out and have these fits of rage, and she would be, you know, at the receiving end of that, and thank God it never got physical, but I know now that emotional abuse is just as damaging as the physical abuse, and I tortured this poor woman. And so she skipped town, and that was it. That's all I needed. She was gone out of my life, and I could drink the way I wanted to drink. No one was going to tell me anything different. And so, like, the summer of 2017 was when that 6-month blackout started. And I couldn't keep a job. I didn't want to work anyway. I spent every last dollar I had. I racked up my credit cards. Like, I just didn't care. I was drinking around the clock, and like, I don't know if anyone here preferred whiskey, but I preferred Irish whiskey, and I drank a lot of it, and I didn't go anywhere without it. How I didn't get a DUI or kill somebody in that time period, I don't know. I mean, my higher power was with me all along through that stretch, and I mean, my higher power has been with me forever, but like, you know, how I made it through that alive, I don't know. And then to be brought to my knees and make that you know, that first surrender, that, you know, that gift of desperation where I just couldn't do it anymore. And you know, so I started my journey reluctantly into sobriety in February of 2018, and I didn't know anything about AA really, other than I knew my sister went to AA meetings, and you know, she had been doing pretty well, it seemed like, you know, but I didn't know about what we do here. And so when I got out of treatment, like, it was actually, I should say, like, when I was in rehab down in Maryland, which the Carpenters Union were so, you know, kind to pay for the whole thing, but it was there I had my, like, first God moment, I guess you could say, where it was nothing like triumphant, or, you know, the clouds didn't split open. Like, I just had this rational thought that, like, you know, I cannot drink alcohol again. Like, if I want to live, then I can never drink again. And I don't know what, that wasn't me. That wasn't the Joe that I was used to hearing, you know, in my head, you know. And so I do now consider that like my first God moment. But you know, so anyway, I got out of rehab, and thank God my sister had already been, you know, in the program, so she told me where to go, and I went to my first meeting. Ironically, it was my first meeting out of rehab was what would have been my 1-year wedding anniversary. So it was kind of like a full circle thing there. And I just kind of, like I said, reluctantly, but I did go to a lot of meetings in those first, you know, 100 days. I wasn't working for the first month or so. I didn't get back to work for a little while, and you know, I was just going to meetings and meeting people, and I met my sponsor in the first couple of weeks, and I just started doing the thing, and you know, when I started, like, I was getting to know my sponsor, and right out of the gate, he kind of guided me. He said, listen, he's like, a lot of people are going to come up to you and try and, you know, tell you need to be doing this, need to be doing that, and you need to get through the steps, and you need to do this, that, and the other thing. He's like, that's not how I did it. He said, I took my time. And he's like, I think you should take your time too. And he always used to say, pray for a slow recovery. And so I was like, okay, well, when do I start? He goes, you already started the first 3 steps. Like, you know, you're already doing the first 3. Like, you know, and I'm not going to be one of those people. I'm not going to rifle through all 3 steps and tell you, but like the first 6 months of my of AA, or me going to AA or coming to AA, he would always say, like, you're working the first 3 steps, and then I did 4 and 5, and that was quite relieving, and everything started to really, that momentum started to happen, and life was really good, and life was really not good sometimes, but for the most part it was like I was even keel, and I was getting through life, and things were happening, and I was recovering certain things, like financially I was recovering, and socially and emotionally, and the spiritual thing didn't really happen for me for a little while. Like my concept of a higher power didn't really come to light until I kind of got through 6 and 7, and then oddly enough for me, my experience has been that, like, when I did 8 and 9, that, like, I really realized that a lot of what I had believed up until that point about my relations with people had been fear-based, really. I mean, I was always afraid of disappointing someone, or I was afraid that, like, I wasn't going to, be cool enough, or make enough money to make my parents proud of me, or by that point just my mom, because my dad did pass away along the way there. But I had to clean up my relations with people, and the only way I found to be able to do that was trusting my higher power to guide me through it. And at first I thought it was like, all right, well, we're gonna make a list of people, and I'm just gonna say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm sorry I was a bad person. I'd love to curse right now, but Joe told me not to. I was sorry for being a dum-dum for all those years. I thought that's all it was going to be, but, like, I didn't realize that through that process, and with guidance from other people in AA, and reliance on my higher power, that, like, I was going to be able to forgive myself for the things I had done. Like, I'm not just cleaning up the street to, like, get people off my back. I'm cleaning up my side of the street so that I can continue to progress into sobriety and understand that, like, yes, the name of the game is to not drink one day at a time, but also, like, I need to be a good person. And if I'm carrying around all this guilt and shame and not owning up to what I've done, then I'm never going to fully open the door. I'm just going to be looking through the crack in the door, the potential that my life has. And so I did the obvious thing, and I made direct amends to such people, and I continue to make living amends to certain people in my life. And then there was people that didn't want to hear it. They were done with me. The damage had been done, and that was it. And I had to accept it. But I made the effort. I'm not responsible for their reaction. I made the effort. The result wasn't necessarily what I had expected, but that's fine. I have to be okay with that, because if I'm not okay with it, I'm keeping that door closed. But the big one that did hurt, and this is I think this is important for me and in my experience, was that, like, that woman who I married and tortured for all that time. Well, no, it wasn't that much time. It was like 3 years. We were only married for 5 months, but it was in that process I wasn't able to get a hold of her. I didn't know how to get a hold of her other than writing her a letter and mailing it to her place of employment. And my sponsor suggested that I write her a letter, and it doesn't have to be long, and just say a few things, and then that's it, and don't expect to hear from her. And I didn't. But in doing that process, and through doing that process, not only did I forgive myself and understand why things happened the way they did, but this profound, another God moment for me, this profound thing happened where I began to, like, instead of being resentful towards her and and mad that she, how dare she screw my life up like that. I started to realize that, like, I was proud of her and commended her for the bravery it took for her to leave a marriage because of the situation I was putting her in. And like, when I had that conceptual thought, like, I was like, where the heck did this come from? And I talked to my sponsor about it, and he's like, dude, that's the program, and that's your higher power working in your life. Like, sometimes you don't see it right away, but like, that's how this thing works. That's the magic of working the program. And again, I'll reiterate, it is sometimes just as much as getting through the day without picking up a drink. But there's so much more to it. Like, there was so much, we were blocking ourselves from so much when we were drinking. Like, it's hard, sometimes it's hard to find the words to describe how it makes me feel. I mean, it's emotional, and it's cool, and like, that was, in a nutshell, my experience with 8 and 9. Now, I continue to be a human being, and I make mistakes all the time, and so I have to continue to make amends to people when I feel like I've wronged them or put them in precarious situations. And a lot of times it happens at work with Joe and I, and we work around some pretty, all I can say is narrow-minded individuals who like, I've apologized to people, and they look at me like I'm some kind of freak or something. Like, what do you mean you're apologizing? Like, showing emotion, like, being a human being, being vulnerable, But again, I'm not responsible for their reaction. I have to do it for myself, so I don't, that door's open. I don't want it to close, And, Lord, I guess I could talk about some of the other experiences I've had in AA, like, being able to help Joe out, and I remember, I'll never forget that day when he came to me, because I had a similar experience when, not that I got sober that day, but I remember talking to someone who, again, we both know, talking to him about my situation, and like, I had that thought, like, man, I really want what this dude has, but at the time I wasn't willing to do anything for it, I wasn't willing to sacrifice anything to get what that guy had. But now I have it, and I'm able to pass it to other people and help, guys like Joe. And I'm so, like, Joe has said a few times, he's like, man, I can't thank you enough. I was like, the only thing you have to do is stay sober, man. Like, you don't have to thank me. I didn't do anything. Like, all I did was what you people taught me how to do, And it's like, it's an endless supply of joy when you watch somebody, when that light comes on and they get it, and they figure it out. Like, I don't have to hurt from alcohol ever again. And like, I think, I go to a couple different beginners meetings, and like, I don't want to say I'm like some kind of vigilante or something, but like, when I see a newcomer get surrounded by, certain types of people in AA, like, I make a point to go to them and be like, you don't have to do it that way. Like, if they make you feel uncomfortable, chances are they're going to continue to make you feel uncomfortable. So like, and then I mildly suggest that they just try to go to a lot of meetings at first. Like, get to know AA, get to know a few people first, and then make a decision as to who you want to have guide you through the program. Because I've seen it. I've seen it numerous times where somebody comes in and they're new and they're vulnerable and they're not really sure if they belong, and like, they're looking for every reason to disqualify themselves, and it only takes one person who may have good intentions, but it's just like, if you go to enough meetings, you can pick the people out who don't have good intentions. And unfortunately, there is some of that goes on in AA. But my job is to help another alcoholic, and by any means, to help someone who's struggling, because I was there. We were all there. Like, we all can relate to that pain and that suffering, and I've heard many people say that, that if someone's lucky enough, like very lucky, to make it back from a relapse, I have never heard anyone say it was fun or it was great or it got better, and they're just stopping back in for a visit. It doesn't get any better, and that's why I don't take it for granted. Like, I have continuous sobriety for 6 years and almost 6 months, because the fear of me picking up a drink scares the living bejesus out of me. Because I don't have. If everything they say is true and you pick up right where you left off, then I'm a dead man. I'm a dead man. So that's enough to keep me coming back. And I almost made it 25 minutes, but 23 minutes all you get.
Thank you, Joe. All right. Please limit your sharing to 3 minutes. Please keep your shares related to the step. If you do feel like drinking, or if you've had a drink today, please see me or speak to someone after the meeting. We ask that you please refrain from the use of profanity. We are in a church and on a spiritual journey. So I'll open the meeting up to share. Joe, you can kind of call it.